For 2 years, I was the invisible ghost in Alistair Blackwood's opulent penthouse. Then he looked at me and asked me to become his wife for one night, a dangerous deception that would change everything. The smell of lemon polish and ammonia is my perfume. It's the scent of hard work, of invisibility. For 2 years I've been the ghost in Alistair Blackwood's penthouse, a silent witness to a life I could only imagine. I'd scrub his marble floors until they reflected the city skyline like a dark mirrored lake. I'd dust the spines of books that were never opened and straighten photos that weren't there. His home was a museum of wealth, cold, beautiful, and utterly empty of personal warmth. I was just another fixture, the cleaning lady he probably couldn't pick out of a lineup. My name is Elena, and my world consists of my 7-year-old son, Leo, and the constant grinding worry of overdue bills. So when he came home early one Tuesday afternoon, finding me on my hands and knees wiping a stubborn scuff from the baseboard, I expected him to walk right past me, as always. But he stopped. I felt his shadow fall over me before I heard his voice. Elena. I froze. He'd never used my name before. I slowly looked up, my heart starting a frantic, nervous rhythm against my ribs. Alistair Blackwood was a man carved from granite and ambition. Sharp suit, sharper jawline, and eyes the color of a stormy sea. Today, however, there was a crack in the facade, a fine line of tension around his mouth. "I have a proposition for you," he said, his voice clipped and precise. He didn't ask me to stand, so I remained on the floor, feeling like a supplicant before a king. "It's unorthodox, but the compensation will be significant." My mind immediately went to Leo's dental bills, the threat of eviction hanging over our tiny apartment. "What kind of proposition, Mr. Blackwood?" He finally gestured for me to rise. I did, wiping my damp hands on my apron. He paced in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, a caged tiger in a $1,000 suit. "I have a critical meeting tomorrow night with some very traditional partners. They value stability, family, things I do not possess." He stopped and turned to face me, his gaze so intense it felt like a physical weight. "I need a wife, for one night." The air left my lungs. I must have misheard him. A joke? Some cruel game the rich play? "Mr. Blackwood, I'm your cleaner." "I'm aware," he said, a flicker of impatience in his eyes. "That's irrelevant. You're presentable, you're intelligent. I've seen the books you borrow from the library that you leave in your bag, and you are, forgive me for being blunt, in need of money. I will pay you $50,000. $50,000. The number echoed in the silent, cavernous room. It was more than I made in a year. It was a lifeline. It was a fantasy. It was terrifying. "Why me?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Because you are a blank slate. No one knows you. And because I trust you won't steal the silverware," he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips before vanishing. "The arrangement is simple. You will be provided with a wardrobe, hair, makeup. You will be given a backstory. We met at a charity gala. Whirlwind romance. You're a former art curator. You will smile. You will be charming. And you will defer to me on all business matters. For one evening of your time, your financial problems will disappear. Do we have a deal?" I thought of Leo. I thought of the constant fear that gnawed at me every night. This was insane. It was stepping into a fairy tale woven from lies. But for Leo, I would walk through fire. "Okay," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "Deal." The next 24 hours were a blur. A sleek black car whisked me away to a private suite at a high-end boutique. A woman named Solange with a severe haircut and a French accent descended upon me with an army of assistants. They tweezed, waxed, and polished me until I felt like a stranger in my own skin. A silk dress the color of midnight was chosen. a whisper-thin material that clung in ways I wasn't used to. Diamonds, cold and heavy, were clasped around my neck and wrist. When they finally turned me to face the mirror, I gasped. The woman staring back wasn't Elena, the cleaner with tired eyes and worn-out jeans. She was a vision of elegance and confidence. She was Mrs. Blackwood. The following evening, Alistair picked me up himself. He didn't say a word when he saw me, but his eyes, those stormy gray eyes, widened almost imperceptibly. A flicker of something I couldn't name passed over his face before the mask of cool indifference snapped back into place. In the back of the silent limousine, he handed me a heavy platinum wedding band. As I slid it onto my finger, the cold metal felt like a shackle. "They're waiting for us at the restaurant," he said, his voice a low murmur. "Remember the details I gave you. Your favorite artist is Rothko. Your favorite city is Florence. You are devoted to me." He paused, turning to look at me, his face half hidden in the passing city lights. His expression was deadly serious. "There's one more thing you need to know, Eleanor. This isn't just about impressing them." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that sent a chill down my spine. "These partners, they're from the family of the man whose company I destroyed to build my empire. They're not here to sign a deal. They're here for reconnaissance. They're looking for a weakness." He met my gaze, and the fake, polite world we were about to enter shattered around me. "You're not just posing as my loving wife tonight. You're posing as my only vulnerability." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and cold as the diamonds on my neck. My only vulnerability. The car glided to a stop in front of an absurdly exclusive restaurant, the kind with no sign on the door. A doorman materialized out of the shadows and opened my door. Alistair was already out, his hand offered to me. As my fingers touched his, a jolt like an electric current passed between us. It wasn't romantic. It was a current of pure, undiluted fear. His grip was firm, possessive. A warning, an anchor. I couldn't tell which. We were led through a hushed, dimly lit dining room to a private alcove. A man and a woman rose to greet us. The man, Jonathan Sterling, was older than Alistair, with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. The woman, his wife Eleanor, was rail-thin and impeccably dressed, her polite smile never quite reaching her shrewd, assessing eyes. She was looking at me, but I felt like she was seeing right through the silk dress and the borrowed diamonds to the worn-out apron underneath. "Alistair, so good to see you," Sterling said, his voice a low rumble. He shook Alistair's hand before turning his frosty gaze to me. "And this must be the lovely Eleanor. My dear, you are even more radiant than the rumors suggest." "Rumors?" My blood ran cold. "What rumors?" "Jonathan, Eleanor," Alistair said smoothly, his hand moving to the small of my back, a gesture of ownership. "My wife, Eleanor." The word wife sounded alien and obscene coming from his lips, but I forced a smile that I hoped looked more serene than terrified. "It's a pleasure to meet you both," I said, my voice thankfully steady. The dinner was a masterclass in psychological warfare disguised as polite conversation. Eleanor Sterling was the inquisitor. She asked about the charity gala, the one I was prepped on. "Were you wearing that stunning red Valentino that was all over the society pages?" she probed, her eyes glinting. My mind raced. Alistair hadn't mentioned a red dress. He'd only given me the bare bones of the story. This was my first test. I gave a light, self-deprecating laugh. "Oh, goodness, no," I said, hoping I sounded breezy. "I've never been one for causing a scene. I was in a simple navy gown. Alistair spent the whole night convincing me I was the most beautiful woman in the room, of course. I glanced at him, infusing my expression with as much adoration as I could muster. Alistair played his part perfectly. He squeezed my hand on the table. "And you were," he murmured, his stormy eyes locking with mine. For a split second, the performance felt real. The connection between us, this desperate alliance, was the only tangible thing in a room full of smoke and mirrors. Jonathan Sterling mostly watched, a predator conserving its energy. He let his wife do the poking and prodding, observing my every reaction. They asked about our whirlwind romance, about our plans for the future. With every question, I felt like I was walking a tightrope over a canyon, with Alistair holding one end and the Sterlings trying to snip the line with their razor-sharp questions. I spoke of Rothko's emotional depth and the light over the Arno in Florence, channeling every art documentary I'd ever watched while folding laundry. I was building a fortress of lies, brick by careful brick, and for a while I thought it was working. I was surviving. Then Jonathan Sterling leaned forward, placing his clasped hands on the table. The convivial atmosphere evaporated. His icy eyes pinned me in place. "It's remarkable how you two kept things so quiet for so long," he said, his voice deceptively casual, "especially with Alistair's schedule. We haven't forgotten your generous bid at the Sotheby's auction in Geneva last fall. A stunning Degas sculpture." He paused and his gaze sharpened, becoming a physical weapon. "Was that a birthday gift for you, my dear Elena? It must have been right after you two were secretly engaged." A dead silence fell over the table, so profound I could hear the frantic beat of my own heart. Geneva, a Degas. My mind was a terrifying, empty white space. This was it. The moment the entire charade crumbled, I felt Alistair's leg tense beside mine under the table, a silent signal of his own alarm. He was about to intervene to cover for me, but that would be an admission of weakness. He would be protecting his fragile wife. I knew in that split second that I had to answer. This was my battle. I let the silence hang for another beat. Then I laughed. It wasn't a nervous titter. It was a warm, genuine laugh that seemed to surprise everyone, including myself. I reached over and placed my hand on Alistair's arm, looking at Jonathan Sterling with an expression of fond exasperation. "Oh, that sculpture," I said, shaking my head with a smile. "You found our one and only premarital argument, Jonathan." I turned my gaze to Alistair, my eyes full of the fabricated adoration that was starting to feel disturbingly real. "Darling, you can't blame a man for trying to buy the world for the woman he loves, can you?" I looked back at the Sterlings, who were now leaning in, completely captivated. "But a Degas," I continued, my voice taking on a tone of gentle reason. "As an art curator, I could tell you its market value, its provenance, its historical significance, but as a woman, I could only see the wing of a children's hospital that could be built for the same price, or the art program we could fund for a dozen inner-city schools." I gave Alistair's arm a squeeze. "So no, I made him withdraw the bid. I told him the greatest gift he could give me was to start a foundation with me instead, one where we could share our good fortune." I smiled sweetly at Jonathan. "The paperwork is still being drawn up, so we've been keeping it quiet. But I suppose the cat's out of the bag now." The air shifted. I had not only answered the question, I had transformed a potential weakness into a testament to our shared values, our deep connection. I had made myself not a gold-digging trophy wife, but a philanthropist with a moral compass, the grounding force to Alistair's ruthless ambition. I had made us stronger. Eleanor Sterling's perfectly painted lips parted slightly in admiration. Jonathan Sterling leaned back in his chair, a slow, impressed smile spreading across his face. He raised his glass. "To the Blackwoods," he said, his icy eyes finally thawing. "A true partnership." The rest of the evening was a victory lap. The deal was discussed, the terms agreed upon. When we finally stepped out into the cool night air, leaving the Sterlings behind, neither of us spoke. The silence in the car on the way back to the penthouse was different. It wasn't tense. It was thick with unspoken admissions. I felt seen. For the first time in 2 years, I wasn't the invisible woman who scrubbed his floors. I was the woman who had saved his empire. When the car stopped, he walked me to the elevator. The $50,000 was already in my account. I saw the notification on my phone. My job was done. "Thank you, Elena," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "You were remarkable." "You hired me to clean up a mess, Mr. Blackwood," I said, a small smile playing on my lips as I handed him back the platinum wedding band. Tonight was just a different kind of mess. I thought that would be the end of it. I went back to my life, paid off my debts, and set aside a college fund for Leo. I returned to the penthouse the next week at my usual time, my bucket and my lemon polish in hand, ready to become a ghost again. But the penthouse was empty. My key no longer worked. My employment agency called a few minutes later to tell me my contract had been terminated with a generous severance. It was over. I felt a strange mix of relief and an odd, hollow disappointment. A week later, a sleek black car I recognized pulled up in front of my rundown apartment building. Alistair Blackwood got out, looking entirely out of place on my cracked and broken sidewalk. He wasn't here to offer me another job posing as his wife. He was holding a thick file. "Elena," he said, bypassing any small talk, "I've spent the last week doing two things. One was closing the deal with Sterling. The other was drawing up the paperwork." He handed me the file. On the cover it read, "The Blackwood Foundation, Director of Philanthropy, Elena Morales." I stared at him, speechless. "You invented a foundation on the spot to save my company," he said, a genuine, unguarded smile finally reaching his eyes. "It seemed only right that I make it real. And I can't think of anyone with a better moral compass to run it. The salary is triple what you were making. You'd be in charge of building those hospital wings and funding those art programs. It's a real job, Elena, a position you've more than earned." I looked from the file in my hands to the man in front of me. He wasn't seeing the cleaning lady. He was seeing me. My mind flashed back to the smell of ammonia and the feeling of invisibility. That was my past. In my hands, I held my future. It smelled like fresh paper, ink, and the intoxicating scent of a second chance. And for the first time in a very long time, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be.